Two men were found on a hill above the city, side by side, each wearing a mask cut from lead. The masks covered the eyes, nothing else. Nobody has ever established what killed them. But this is the part that stays with you. In their notebook, written before they went, 1630, be at the determined place. 1830, ingest capsule after the effect. Protect metals, await signal, mask. They climbed the hill and put the masks on. You're at the odd observatory. Let's take a closer look. This is a case that almost everyone tells the same way. Two men, lead masks, therefore radiation, therefore flying saucers. That version is wrong in a specific and checkable way. And once you see why, the whole thing changes shape. So we are going to do it differently. We are going to follow the document. Niterói, Brazil, across the bay from Rio de Janeiro, the 20th of August 1966. An 18-year-old named Jorge da Costa Alves is flying a kite on Morro do Vintém Hill, scrub and rock above the rooftops. The kite goes down in the undergrowth. He climbs after it, and he finds two men. They are lying on their backs, side by side, partly covered by grass. Neither has been hidden, neither has been arranged violently. Both are in formal suits, both are wearing waterproof raincoats, in August on a hillside in Brazil. And over the eyes of each man is a mask made of lead, cut by hand, roughly the shape of welding goggles. Beside them, an empty water bottle, a packet holding two towels, and a small notebook. There are no wounds, no signs of a struggle, nothing to suggest anyone dragged them, or fought them, or forced them. The grass around them is undisturbed. Police and firefighters do not reach the bodies until the following day. The hill is steep enough that climbing it in a suit carrying sheet lead is work. They did it anyway, deliberately, together. Their names were Miguel José Viana, 34, and Manuel Pereira da Cruz, 32. They were electronics technicians from Campos dos Goitacazes. This is the detail most retellings hurry past on the way to the flying saucers. These were not two lost men wandering into the dark. They repaired radios and televisions for a living. That is a trade, not a physics degree, but it does mean they handled metal and knew what it was for. On the 17th of August, they told their wives they were going to São Paulo to buy work materials. They went to Niterói instead, 250 kilometers down the coast, and less than half the way to the city they had named. They never went any further. There, they bought a raincoat in a hardware shop and a bottle of water in a convenience store. A shop assistant remembered Viana that day. He said he seemed nervous, as if he had an appointment. When they were found, there was a plastic bag tied inside Miguel's clothing. Inside it, 157,000 cruzeiros, still there. And 2 bus tickets home to Campos, unused. Other accounts put the sum they set out with at 2,300,000. The paper that covered the bodies reports a fraction of that still on them. Nobody has ever reconciled those two numbers. Among their effects were bus tickets dated the 15th, 2 days before they told anyone they were leaving. Whatever this was, it had been planned for at least 5 days. And they told nobody. Not their wives, not their families, not the people they worked with. 2 men with steady trades and households to run invented a business trip to another state and went somewhere else entirely, to keep an appointment they had made days in advance. But here's the part almost nobody talks about. We have the page they wrote before they went. It is in order, and it has times on it. Most of the notebook is exactly what you would expect from two working technicians. Symbols, numbers, reference codes for valves. And then on one page, this. 1630, B, at the determined place. 1830, ingest capsule after the effect. Protect metals await signal. Mask. Take that apart slowly, because every clause is load-bearing. 1630, B at the determined place. A time and a location they had already agreed. The hill was chosen in advance, which fits a man in a shop looking like he had an appointment. 1830, ingest capsule. 2 hours after arriving, not on the way, not on reaching the top, after a deliberate wait. Whatever they took, the timing of it mattered enough to write down. 2 hours is long enough to be certain you are alone, and long enough to watch the light start going. After the effect, they expected an effect. Whether they expected to still be conscious when it came is our reading. The note says only after, and that could mean after it begins or after it passes. Protect metals. The most opaque clause on the page, and the one that has carried most of the theorizing. It could mean shield the metal. It could mean shield yourself with the metal. The note does not say, and neither will we. Await signal. Mask. Then 2 more actions in order. And the final word written on that page is the name of the object found on both their faces. This is not a farewell note. Nobody schedules a suicide to the half hour and then writes down what to do afterwards. It is a procedure, written by people who expected to be there to carry it out. Now the masks, and this is where almost every version of this story goes wrong. The reasoning you will hear is, the masks were lead. Lead stops radiation, therefore they were protecting themselves from radiation, therefore something radioactive was coming. Lead does stop radiation, that part is true. It is dense, and density is what absorbs gamma and X-rays. But look at what these masks actually were. Radiation gear covers the head and the body and gives you a window to see through. It has to. These did the opposite. Head, face, throat, and body left bare, and the eyes sealed behind dense, opaque metal. As radiation shielding, that is useless. As eye protection, it is exactly the right shape, and that is our reading, not the records. So, not shields against something passing through them, but shields for the eyes. And we should be honest about a limit. Nothing in the record explains why they chose lead specifically, and we are not going to invent a reason. Our reading is about the shape, what the masks covered, and what they left bare, not about the metal. So what did they think they were going to see? There is a partial answer, and it comes from inside the investigation rather than from the theories built on top of it. In Miguel's workshop, police found the tools and the offcuts they had used to cut those masks themselves. They also found reading matter about spirits, with passages marked, and what was marked concerned intense luminosity. A man named Elso Correa Gomez gave a statement to police. According to Gomez, the group called themselves scientific spiritualists. He did not give it as a passerby. Correo de Mañá reported him arrested in Campos, held as a suspect in the deaths, a friend of Manuel's, and a former student of Miguel's. He said they would withdraw to remote places, perform a ritual, and take drugs. He also said he had built homemade explosives with them. That is one witness, and it should be weighed as one witness. Gomez was describing a group he belonged to police, while being held as a suspect in the deaths of 2 of its members. Which is the honest problem with our own reading. A man under arrest for 2 deaths has every reason to offer police a strange story that is not murder. We are leaning on him because he is what there is. But it is the only account we have from someone who actually knew them, and it is consistent with 2 things nobody had to interpret: what was marked in the book on the workshop bench and what was written on the page in the notebook. Line those up and they point the same way: a group expecting contact, a book marked at blinding light, eye shields cut by hand, and a note that says, "Take the dose, wait, protect the metal, watch for the signal, mask." But they came from 3 different places: a workshop bench, a statement taken from a man under arrest, and a hillside. It is us putting them in a row. Now, separate what was written down in 1966 from what 60 years of retelling added: a lead supplier who sold them shielding, a bar, a man asking the time. None of it is in the Portuguese sources. What is there is quieter and better. A shop assistant who thought Viana looked like a man with an appointment. The radiation reading, not in the record. It is an inference people made from the word lead, and it survives because it sounds technical. They were trying to contact Mars. That sounds like 60 years of retelling talking. It is not. On the 30th of August, 1966, Correio da Manhã reported that Gomez had told police the 2 men were conducting experiments to speak with the planet Mars. 10 days after the bodies were found, it was already in the papers, which tells you something more useful than whether it is true. The strangest part of this story was not added later. It was there in week 1. And it came from a man the police were holding. The flying saucer. The case became a UFO story largely through an article published in 1967 in a British UFO magazine, a publication with an obvious interest in the answer being a spacecraft. None of that is a conspiracy. It is what happens to a strange story over 60 years. Each retelling keeps what is vivid and drops what is dull, and the dull parts are usually the evidence. And here is what got dropped. The autopsy took 2 months to report. Its verdict was 3 words: cause undetermined. The organs were too decomposed to test. The toxicology that could have answered this, that could have told us what was in those capsules, was never carried out. And no capsules were ever found on that hill. So we are left with 4 explanations and an honest 5th. 1. Whatever was in the capsules killed them. It fits the note. It fits 2 men dying together with no injuries. And it fits an experiment that went wrong. It is also permanently untestable. The one examination that could have confirmed it was never done. 2. They were murdered for the money, and this one is not ours. 4 days in, the officer leading the case, Delegado Idovan Ferreira, told Correio da Manhã that his search had turned up nothing and that the authorities were now admitting it might be a case of latrocínio, robbery with homicide. It is the strongest of the alternatives, and it still has to explain the bag of money nobody took. The unused tickets home. 2 bodies laid neatly side by side, and a notebook left behind that explains exactly what they came to do. 3. A ritual or experiment that went wrong. This is the reading with actual testimony behind it. Gomes's statement, the marked book, the hand-cut masks. 4. They were waiting for a spacecraft. This is the version the case is famous for. It carries the least evidence and the clearest motive for having been invented. Folklore, labeled. And the 5th, we do not know. The record stops at cause, undetermined, and everything past that point is somebody's preference, including ours. So let us be exact about ours. We think the masks are the strongest evidence in the case because they were made by people who understood materials, and their design tells you what those people were afraid of, not something passing through them, something they were about to see. What stays with me is not the masks, and it is not the theories. It is that two capable, ordinary men who repaired radios, who had wives, who had work to go back to on Monday, believed something specific enough to write down a timetable for it. They believed it enough to cut lead by hand, to put on their best clothes, to travel 250 kilometers to a city they had never mentioned, climb a hill in the heat, sit down, take a dose, and wait. 60 years on, we still have the notebook, we still have the masks, we still have the hill. What we never got was the one test that could have told us what was in those capsules. Whatever they were waiting for, they were certain enough about it to write down the time. That is the part no explanation removes. Two men on a hill, checking a schedule they had made days earlier and doing exactly what it said. The record ends at 3 words. Everything after that is us. If you want more odd observations like this one, subscribe. There is a new one on this channel every week. Which explanation best fits the surviving evidence? And what evidence would change your mind? Put it in the comments.